So hi guys, mayong adlaw. Welcome to NatzMath TV. So in this video, I will be teaching you on how to factor out quadratic trinomials when a is equal to 1. This lesson is related to the topic that I had presented in my previous video about factoring perfect square trinomials and factoring a common monomial factor. A quadratic trinomial is in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. This is a quadratic expression. So in this example, our a here, our a is equal to 1. So I will have a separate video about factoring a quadratic trinomial when a is greater than 1. So let's proceed to our example. So how do we factor out a quadratic trinomial when a is equal to 1? Okay, let's start with example number 1. We are given x squared plus 8x plus 7. We have to take note that in factoring quadratic trinomial, the factors of quadratic trinomials are two binomials. So, if we are going to factor out x squared plus 8x plus 7, we can have these binomials. So, first things first is to write these two parentheses to indicate the two binomials. Then we have x squared. We factor out the first term, which is x squared. In this case, our a here is 1. It has an assumed coefficient 1 here. So x squared, we factor out x squared, that is x times x. So that means x times x is equal to x squared. Then afterwards, we evaluate the last term, the sign of the last term. If the sign of the last term is positive, we just simply copy the sign of the middle term. So since this is positive and our middle term is positive, so we write positive and positive. Next is, we get the factors of 7 that when added will give us 8. Since 7 is a prime number, there is no other factors of 7 except 7 times 1. So we have 7 times 1. 7 times 1 is 7, and when we add 7 plus 1 is 8. So we can use the factors 7 times 1 here. So we can have 7 here and 1 here. So we can have x plus 7 times x plus 1, or we can interchange, we have x plus 1 times x plus 7. If we want to check if our answer is correct, if these factors x plus 7 times x plus 1 are really the factors of this trinomial x squared plus 8x plus 7, we can just simply use the FOIL method, distributive property. Okay? So we distribute x times x times 1, 7 times x, 7 times 1. When we combine like terms, then we will get this trinomial. So let's proceed to another example. We are given x squared minus 11x plus 10. The same, we write two parentheses to indicate the binomials. Then, we factor out x squared. Of course, we have x times x. Then, we evaluate the sign of the last term. In this case, our last term is positive 10. So, the sign of the last term is positive. So, therefore, we copy the sign of the middle term. So, in this case, our middle term is negative. So, therefore, we will just simply copy negative and negative. So, here, we have our last term is positive and our middle term is positive. That's why we have here plus and plus. Here, since our last term is positive and our middle term is negative, so we just simply copy negative and negative, or minus and minus. Now, next is, again, we get the factors of 10 in such a way that when added will give us 11. So we list down the factors of 10. So we can have 5 times 2, 10 times 1. But when we add, 5 plus 2 will give us 7. But we are looking for the number 11. So we have 10 plus 1. So therefore, we can use the factors 10 times 1. So we can write 1 here, and we can write 10 at the second factor. Or we can have x minus 10 times x minus 1. So we can interchange. The same, if we want to check, we use FOIL method. So the factors of this trinomial x squared minus 11x plus 10 are x minus 1 times x minus 10. Now let's proceed to our next example. We are given x squared plus 4x minus 12. Now as you can see, our last term is negative 12. Unlike with the first two examples, which are all positive. We have here positive 7 and positive 10. That's why we just simply copy the sign of our middle term. Here, our last term is negative. So the same process, we have here two binomials. We write the two binomials here. Then we factor out the first term. Our first term is x squared, so write x times x. Now this time, since our last term is negative, we do not copy the sign of the middle term. So what we need to do is just simply write the sign plus and minus or minus and plus. So we can write here minus or we can write here plus. Now this time, we get the factors of 12 that when subtracted will give us the middle term or the coefficient of the middle term. In this case, we are looking for 4. So we get the factors of 12 that when subtracted will give us 4. So what are the possible factors of 12? So we can have 12 times 1, we can have 4 times 3, and we can have 6 times 2. So we have 12 times 1 is 12, but 12 minus 1 is 11. So we cannot use this factor. Say 4 times 3 is 12, but 4 minus 3 is 1, but we are looking for 4. Another is 6 times 2 is 12, and 6 minus 2 is 4. So we can use these factors. Now we place the bigger factor to the sign identical to the sign of the middle term. Since our middle term is positive, so we will write our 6 to positive and 2 in the negative. So the factors of this trinomial x squared plus 4x minus 12 are x minus 2 times x plus 6, or we can interchange x plus 6 times x minus 2. Now let's proceed to our next example. We are given x squared plus 11x plus 18. So the same, we have here the binomials. We factor out the first term, which is x squared, so we have x times x. Then our last term is positive 18. Since the last term is positive, so we copy the sign of the middle term. Again, do not forget, if the last term is positive, we just simply copy the sign of the middle term. So since our middle term is positive, so these are all positive. And we get the factors of 18 that when added will give us 11. So we can have 3 times 6 times 3, we can have 9 times 2, we can have 18 times 1. But when we add, 6 plus 3 will give us 9. 9 plus 2 will give us 11. So we are looking for 11, so therefore we will be using the factors 9 times 2. Of course, we cannot use 18 times 1 because this will give us 19. So we will be using 9 times 2. So we can write 9 here and 2 here, or we can write x plus 2 times x plus 9. Next example, we have here x squared minus 13x plus 40. So still our last term is positive. So we have two binomials, the factors of x squared, so we write x times x. Then, since the last term is positive, we copy the sign of the middle term. So since our middle term is negative, so we write negative. The factors of 40 that when added will give us 13. So we can write down 10 times 4. 10 times 4 is 40, but 10 plus 4 is 14. But we are looking for 13. We can have 40 times 1. But 40 plus 1 is 41. Another is 8 times 5. 8 times 5 is 40, and 8 plus 5 is 13. So we got here 13. So therefore, we will be using these factors. So we can write 8 here and 5 here, or we can write 5 and 8. So the factors are x minus 8 times x minus 5. Here, next example. x squared minus x minus 90. So the same. We have here binomials. We factor out the first term, x squared. So we have x times x. Now this time, since our last term is negative, that is negative 90, we affix the double sign plus and minus or minus plus. So we can have minus and plus, or we can have plus and minus. Now, as you can see, we have here negative x or minus x. This has an assumed coefficient 1. So we have negative 1. So therefore, our coefficient here is negative 1. So we get the factors of 90 that when subtracted will give us 1. Just 90 times 1, or we can have 10 times 9. When we multiply 90 times 1, that is 90, but 90 minus 1 is 89. We are looking for 1. So we have here 10 times 9 is 90, and 10 minus 9 is 1. Okay, so therefore we will be using these factors, and we write the bigger factor to the sign identical to our middle term. So since our middle term is negative, so we write 10, which is bigger than 9, to our negative. So we write x minus 10 times x plus 9. So we can have x plus 9 times x minus 10. Okay, next example. This time we have x squared minus 15x plus 50. So this time we have positive. So our factors are, we factor out x squared, that is x times x. Then the last term is positive, so we copy the sign of the middle term. So we have negative and negative, since our middle term is negative. Then the factors of 50 that when added will give us 15, and that is 5 times 10. 5 times 10 is 50. 5 plus 10 is 15. So we can write 5 times 10. So that is x minus 5 times x minus 10. Next example, x squared minus x minus 56. So factors, again, we have an assumed coefficient 1 here. So the factors of x squared, we have x times x. The last term is negative, so affects the double sign plus and minus. Plus and minus or minus plus. Then the factors of 56 that when subtracted will give us 1. So we can have 56 times 1, we can have 8 times 7. 56 times 1 is 56, but 56 minus 1 is 55. But we have here factors 8 times 7, which is 56, and 8 minus 7 is 1. We have here 1. So we will be using these factors. Now we write the bigger factor to the sign identical to our middle term. Our middle term is negative, so we write 8 to the negative. We cannot write 8 here in positive. So we write 8 to the sign identical to our middle term. So our middle term is negative, that's why we write our 8 with a negative. So we write 7. So these are the factors of x squared minus x minus 56. So let's proceed to our next example. So we have here 3x squared minus 3x minus 18. But as you can see, our a here is greater than 1. But this topic is about factoring quadratic trinomial when a is equal to 1. But this example involves common monomial factor. So we need to factor out first the common monomial factor before we can factor out the quadratic trinomial when a is equal to 1. So in this case, our common monomial factor to each of these terms is 3. So we can factor out the 3. What remains shall be x squared. So we have here 3x squared. We factor out 3. So what remains is x squared. We copy minus. We factor out the 3. So what remains here is 1x or x. It has an assumed coefficient 1. Then we copy minus. We factor out 3. So what remains shall be 6. So if we want to check if these factors are correct, we just simply multiply 3 times x squared will give us 3x squared. 3 times negative x will give us negative 3x. 3 times negative 6 will give us negative 18. So this time, this is now our quadratic trinomial where a is equal to 1. So we factor out further. We have the common monomial factor, which is 3, and we factor out the trinomial. We have x squared, so we factor out x times x. So that is x times x will give us x squared. Now our last term is negative 6. So since this is negative, we affix the double sign plus and minus, or we can say minus and plus. Then, we get the factors of 6 that when subtracted will give us 1. So we have 6 times 1 and 3 times 2. 6 times 1 is 6, but 6 minus 1 is 5. So we cannot use this factor. 3 times 2 is 6, and 3 minus 2 is 1. So we will be using this factor. And since our middle term is negative, so we place our bigger factor to the sign identical to our middle term. So, this is negative, we will write 3 here in the negative and 2 in the positive. So, these are now the factors of this trinomial. Next example, similar to the concept here, we have the common monomial factor. We have 6x squared plus 66x plus 60. So our common monomial factor shall be x. What remains is x squared plus 11x plus 10. So that is 6 times x squared is equal to 6x squared. 6 times 11x is equal to 66x. 6 times 10 is equal to 60. We factor out this quadratic trinomial, so we have the common factor which is 6. Our last term is positive, so we factor out x squared, so we have x times x. Since our last term is positive, so we copy the sign of the middle term. So our middle term is positive, so we copy plus and plus. Then this time, since this is positive, we get the factors of 10 that when added will give us 11. We have 5 times 2 is 10, but 5 plus 2 is 7. We have 10 times 1 is 10, and 10 plus 1 is 11. So we will be using this factor. And since they are all positive, so we can write 10 here and 1 here, or we can interchange x plus 1 times x plus 10. Next example, we have 5x squared minus 30x plus 40. So the same, our common monomial factor is 5, so we factor out 5. What remains shall be x squared minus 6x plus 8. So, 5 times x squared, that is 5x squared. 5 times negative 6x, that is negative 30. 5 times 8, that is 40. Then we factor out 5 times. We factor out this trinomial. We have x squared, so we have x times x. Then, our last term is positive, so we copy the sign of the middle term. Since our middle term is negative, so we write negative. The factors of 8 that when added will give us 6. So we can use the factors 4 times 2, which is 8, and 4 plus 2 is 6. So we can write 4 here and 2 here, or we can write 2 and 4 here. So these are now the factors of this trinomial 5x squared minus 30x plus 40. Okay, so that's it. I hope you have learned something from this video. I still have plenty of videos here, so you can click these videos here related to this topic. So this lesson is for junior high school mathematics, specifically for grade 8 students. So for now, thank you and God bless.